Ben Riggs presents Reading D&D Aloud. Episode 66, Secrets of the Best-Selling D&D Adventure of All Time, with Rich Baker.
Ladies and gentlemen, human beings of all sorts, wizards, entwives, Rohirrim, what have you. Welcome to what today I'm going to call Dungeons and Dragons and Conversations. That name, it comes from one of you, so thank you very much. And we're going to keep we're on a quest for a new name for this podcast. But before I fall into that infinite pit of digression, our guest tonight is a giant in the realms, literally and figuratively. With us is Richard Baker, a legendary Dungeons and Dragons designer, novelist, and world builder whose fingerprints are all over the game. He's helped shape settings like the Forgotten Realms, Birthright, Alternity. He's designed iconic adventures, written novels, and whether he's crafting epic battles or breathing life into new worlds, Rich knows how to roll natural 20s. So grab your dice and brace for adventure. Richard Baker is in the house. You know, my intros keep getting sillier and sillier, and I kind of lean into it.
Yeah, have fun with it. Why not?
When I had Ben Milton on here, I wrote one that rhymed.
Nice.
That may have been a bridge too far. Maybe I went too far with that. But so Rich, we just started talking about what was probably your most read, most played adventure. I'm assuming by an exponential amount. When I was like, oh, I better hit record, and that is the Lost Mine of Phandelver. When I was researching for this show, I came upon a fact that I didn't know, which was that Bloomberg News actually reported some sales numbers for Phandelver. And the starter set in North America, and again, this is the 5e starter set that came out in 2014. It sold 126,000 units in 2014, which is amazing. Gangbusters, fantastic. That's, absolutely incredible. That's like I think 4 times the best-selling Dark Sun adventure ever, for example. But then over time, something happened that almost never happened to D&D sales at any other time in D&D's entire history. They started to go up after the initial year of release. And in 2018, Bloomberg reported sales of 306,000 units sold in North America. So, I mean, it must have sold millions of copies at least, right?
Wow.
And
so 2018, just the 1 year, over 300K.
2018
that's
alone,
not cumulative to that point. That's 300K into, wow.
300,000K in 2018 alone. And that's before the pandemic. And I will tell you, everybody who I've interviewed from Wizards from the 5th edition era at this point, and I've interviewed, I'm going to say a dozen people, everyone has described a sales pattern of, oh yeah, 5e came out and it was good. The next year, maybe there was a drop or maybe it went up a little bit, but then in 16, it got higher again. And every year after that, it got higher and higher and higher until 2020 when it just blew off the charts. So, I mean, like, what did it sell 1 million copies in 2020 alone? That wouldn't be crazy to me. Even with by that point, they had, I think, the Essentials kit out too, even though there's theoretically a competing product. I mean, Phandelver's really good and people pushed people to that. So, that's not a question, it's just praise. So to refine that into an actual query, could you tell us the story of the creation of perhaps the greatest selling D&D adventure of all time? Tell us about the creation of that as you remember
it. Sure. So I started working on the adventure that would become Lost Mine of Phandelver in, I believe it would be late 2012, maybe first thing early 2013. Because regrettably, Wizards of the Coast had decided they could no longer afford to retain my services
The
at
fools!
the end of 2011. Unfortunately, layoffs are part of the game biz. If you work anywhere in the game biz long enough, sooner or later your turn's going to come up. Uh, Under Washington state law, they couldn't immediately turn around and contract me to do anything. There was a blackout of a year essentially at that point. So, uh, while I was still, as you can imagine, a little sore at Wizards, on the other hand, they do pay well. And hey, I like D&D. I worked on it for 20 years. It's fairly easy for me to pick up a freelance project and go to work on it. So really, kind of as soon as my blackout period ended from the layoff, I was willing to take on a little work and writing a relatively short adventure. It Phandelver is 25,000 words, give or take, or at least my draft of it was something close to that, and that's pretty standard size for what we would have called back in the day like a one module unit adventure. Wizards reached out and said, "Hey, if you're looking for freelance, we could really use someone to come in and do our adventure for the starter set of D&D."
Can I ask, when you say Wizards reached out, can I ask who at Wizards reached out?
I'm Oh boy, I'm pretty sure it was Chris Perkins
Okay,
at that
cool.
point. Yeah, yeah. Um, Chris and I obviously go way back, and we had been working together, all the way back from TSR days, just about. So, you know, I'd known him quite a while. And obviously, I was pretty jazzed about that. I was definitely looking for some work, and this is something I know how to do, and I was happy to dive in and get my hands, dirty with a new edition. Kind of ironically, I had done a very early on adventure in both third edition and fourth edition. In third edition, I had done Forge of Fury, and fourth edition, I had done Thunderspire Labyrinth. So I was kind of getting like first year adventures in this would be my third edition running of of doing that. So I was happy to jump in, and I my philosophy in creating an adventure is always to sort of what's the vision, what's the core brand premise, right? What's the thing this adventure is trying to be? And I had an adventure I had done in third edition called Red Handed Doom, and it's like I want to write the Fight the Horde adventure. All right, I want to write about the captains of the West stopping the army, attacking the lands of the good races. Uh, you know, uh, so in Lost Mine of Phandelver, it's like what's kind of the bog standard ground zero of a good introductory campaign in the Forgotten Realms that would have a lot of the things that people playing D&D for the first time would want to experience. You're going to want to fight goblins. You're going to want to fight bandits. There should be a dragon in the adventure somewhere. Uh, you know, uh, Chances to talk your way out of encounters, chances to meet monsters you shouldn't fight, chances to meet NPCs who can help you, chances to meet NPCs who will stab you in the back, and kind of just do a sort of in the make the nicest, most self-contained little sandbox around a town that I could, and just kind of explore it. I decided pretty early on. One of the first things that kind of occurred to me as I was starting to kind of lay this out is, uh, in 2012 or 2013, rather, when I was starting to write this, I no longer had to explain to the audience what a quest hub was. I could assume that everybody buying this box and playing this game had probably played World of Warcraft and understood there's NPCs standing around with little yellow question marks over their heads. You should talk to those people. Right? So, in a lot of ways, it's like this is a time where I actually went back to MMOs were derived and driven so much from tabletop. This is a case where I looked back at writing a tabletop product and said, I'm going to take what we've taught people by so much success being out there in the world of Warcrafts and all the other MMOs, and I'm going to capitalize on that and not try to explain to people things that they probably know from those games. Phandelver has, a half a dozen essentially little side quests that are all kind of bestowed right there in town. And it's got a couple of good main story quests you can keep pulling the threads on and following if you want. And it's just a nice little sandbox.
So, have you put up your shingle to look at other people's adventures?
I not specifically really. I mean, obviously my day job, I'm a writer on Elder Scrolls Online, so I'm always looking at essentially adventures because a quest in an MMO is pretty close to an adventure for a tabletop RPG. So I find that I'm using that skill set all the time to kind of look at an MMO quest and say, are we delivering the information in the right time, in the right place? Is there, the right pacing of activity? Is there a way we can have the players interact with the bad guy before they just fight him in the last room, right? What ways can we get the villain out and show him off in time for the players to appreciate them before they get a chance to beat them? All those sorts of tools are things I'm just using, in my day job.
I mean, I realize that this is, all just polishing your doorknob at this point, but like, uh, I mean, what would you charge? Like, if someone was like, I have a 25,000 word adventure, and I want the guy that wrote Phandelver to look at it. I'm sitting here, and I'm like, how much do you like if you were actually getting what you deserve for that? I'm like, is that $2,000, $5,000, like 25,000 words of text? Like, if it was a real disaster, it could really like. No, anyway, now I'm
Yeah,
rambling off.
fixing a real disaster would take a lot longer than telling you it was a real disaster. I'll tell you it was a real disaster in a couple of hours. It's like, man, you're not going to have to pay me a couple $1,000s for. I spent about 2 hours and figured out you can't publish this. Figuring out how to fix it. It's kind of the old the thing, and any kind of like creative work, and especially like in creative leadership, working with other designers, um, working with freelancers, coordinating any kind of collaborative creative effort like that. It's always a little bit frustrating if you look at something and say, it's going to take me as long to explain to this guy exactly how to fix it as it would take me to just fix it. So yeah, it's always really kind of diving in and explaining the exact steps somebody would have to take to make something right. That could be a little bit time consuming, but diagnosing some of the initial problems and kind of maybe giving us some pointers, that would probably not be too bad. I guess I would charge a consulting fee by the hour, and I would kind of keep track of how many hours I had to look at something. If I was reading a adventure for you know hopefully a day or so would give me an idea of what had to be done with it. So I wouldn't beat up people too much for that, but yeah, we'll see. I've never tried hanging out my shingle on that. Maybe I should.
I mean, yeah, like given the generations that have cut their teeth on Phandelver, I mean, and the fact that those people are now publishing, it would certainly seem like you'd be in demand, probably more demand than you want. So, which I guess now that we're talking about bad adventures, I'll ask you this question, and you can just not answer if you don't want to, or be as vague as you want to. Um, I have, when talking to people, typically focused on what adventures were successful, what adventures did well. I don't thinking other than the last second edition adventure. I think it was Die Vecna Die. I think that's the only D&D adventure that anyone has told me about or I looked at where it was kind of like that didn't go so well. Um, but I'll ask you this: can you think of any notable failures in adventure design from your time working on D&D? A tough question, so I'm sorry in advance.
No, it's all right. Um, Here's actually kind of a little confession or secret of mine, and that is, I often kind of hate writing adventures because it's really hard. It's a very difficult, strange medium to write in. Uh, which is funny because I've come to be associated with a number of adventures that are pretty successful and pretty well regarded. So even though I kind of moan and groan and gnash my teeth about actually doing it, I guess I'm better at it than I think. But When you think about it, right, an adventure is you're trying to come up with a story where you don't know who the heroes are and you don't know what decisions they're going to make. If you're going to try and write a novel out of that pitch, that would be a really hard novel to write. Um, so sometimes you have to kind of make assumptions, and they work or they don't. If I would say there's, I found, out of my own things, Eternal Boundary, the an early Planescape adventure. I kind of look back at and I think that was tough. That had a lot of vignettes and snippets that were fun, but I don't know that I actually really kind of captured the Planescape vibe with that one as well as I could have. It's an okay story, but you can kind of tell that I was trying to figure out what a Planescape adventure ought to be, and in a lot of ways, it's a bog standard D&D adventure that's just in a the Planescape setting with lots of Burke and Cutter and Planescape jargon thrown in as almost like set dressing. I mean, you think about like how good some of the later Planescape adventures were, where they really could kind of take advantage of what the setting was offering because people kind of grokked it by that point. Eternal Boundary, I think, kind of pales in comparison.
Which adventures would you send people to for Planescape?
Oh, oh shoot. I would actually have to go and look at the list now.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Because now I'm totally blanking. I'm thinking about things like, I could think about the hook. I was like, oh, the one where you're actually trying to bargain with, an angel's soul. Is like, what was the name of that one? And that was, so yeah. Don't make me look. I'll have to stop and
it's okay. Don't worry about it. Anyone can go and ask ChatGPT now. What's the Planescape adventure with the angel's soul? And heck, I'll do it. And in the middle of the next question, I'll go ask and figure it out. But that brings me to a hobby horse. I think I often return to. I often think about the skills of role playing game as adventure writing, TTRPG design, and setting. And I don't know that there are a lot of people that are good at all three. People seem to have a thing they're good at, and parts that they're weaker in. But it seems like you have remarkable contributions to both TTRPG design and adventure writing because you worked on third edition. You were part of the initial design team for that, and again, like I'd have to go digging into my books, but I think for best-selling D&D adventure of all time, I think it has to be either you, Curse of Strahd, or
Curse
Keep on the Borderlands. Yeah, but
Curse
for best-selling,
really
for best-selling,
I mean, it's not just a bestseller; it's also really, really good.
They
knocked it out of the park. Yeah,
and so what makes you think that is an especially strong adaptation to fifth edition?
I think it's all the work they did outside the castle, right? That it's not just you show up on the doorstep of a vampire's castle and you're kind of going from there, which essentially is what the very original Strahd adventure was. They really kind of developed Barovia and created NPCs, other than the one vampire you're going to deal with, and rooted those NPCs in stories and gave you reasons to move all over the that domain. And for many parties playing through the Curse of Strahd, right, you might play months at your table before you ever get around to going to the vampire's castle, right? And it's really compelling, interesting play, all the way through that. And because you eventually get really scared of going to the vampire's castle. You start to realize that's a vampire's castle. It's a really tough vampire. That's where you go when you want to die. So I just think they do a fantastic job of turning a castle into a kingdom, and a kingdom into a really compelling setting that's just oozing. Yeah, it's Transylvania, right? I mean, it's Dracula's castle is great, but Transylvania is really interesting too. And this Curse of Strahd really makes Transylvania the setting around the castle just as important as the castle itself, and it really works.
Have you heard the story of how Chris Perkins wrote that?
No, I don't think so.
So, um, I heard this from a source, and then I fact checked it with Chris Perkins. So, to the best of my knowledge and memory, it is true. So, Wizards apparently has like a winter break. Is that correct?
Uh, yeah, the company was always great about giving you Christmas to New Year's off. Don't tell me you wrote that in 8 days, because I'll go out and throttle the man if I see him. That's ridiculous.
That is the tale that I've been told is that he went and he wrote it over that break. He went away with I6 Ravenloft and came back with Curse of Strahd in just over a week.
No, I boggle.
Yeah, well, and again, I shouldn't say just over a week. Again, maybe
Yeah.
it was longer that
Yeah.
Christmas for some reason. So, because again, 2 weeks, you're like, it gets more reasonable. But
Yeah, I mean, I could believe maybe he got the castle in 8 days, right? That's believable. What I mean, it's a 200-page book.
it's a lot. It's a lot. But his family, gosh, I want to say they're somewhere way out in Atlanta, Canada at this point.
I want to
So
say it's like Prince Edward Island or something.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So hey, maybe he got stranded for Christmas. He
The
also
Frankenstein thing, right? They get
oh yeah,
snowed
that's
in,
such a
right?
good story. If anyone doesn't know, can you tell the Frankenstein thing?
Oh, it actually goes back to the year without a summer, 1816. It turns out that Mary Shelley and a whole bunch of her friends, which included a lot of several really kind of notable poets and writers of that time from England, were had gone to Switzerland, somewhere in the Alps for.
I want to say it was Lake Geneva.
It might have been, yeah.
I'll look it up.
St. Moritz, maybe something like that. But they're off in the Alps, and they're going to winter in the Alps. And it turns out, or maybe it was even summer in the Alps. Maybe it was literally the winter, year without a summer. Weather's atrocious. It turns out we've discovered now that was probably caused by the eruption of the volcano Tambora in Indonesia, which I think is fascinating. But anyway, essentially we had a nuclear winter in 1816, and they were snowed in for months. And the story goes, as a way to entertain themselves, they gave themselves a writing contest, and everybody went away for a few weeks to kind of write their submission for the castle, the castle contest that they were going to judge. And Mary Shelley came back with Frankenstein. I think she was only 19 or 20 at the time. and wrote, Frankenstein, which people have called, essentially the first work of modern science fiction.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy.
Yeah,
and it was Lake Geneva, which is
wow. Okay, fact check me even. That's cool.
There's a nice echo there, and Chat GPT suggests the adventure from Planescape was Fires of Dis.
Yep, that sounds right.
So,
I always like that one.
I think we're a couple digressions in here, so I'm going to try and step backwards. I think I was asking you if you felt like you were better at adventure writing, TTRPG design, or setting creation as a creative.
Boy, that's really a difficult question for me, because I know many other people in this line of work who, as you say, feel like they kind of specialize in one or the other. Really, kind of get a reputation for for being really good at one or really excelling. And I always loved kind of all three aspects, right? That I certainly love just noodling on new setting stuff, right? Making up worlds, inventing cool spots to explore and stop around in. The pitch for the world. What's this world about? What's the cool things to do in this world? I like the mechanical design. I like thinking about how characters work, what they should be good at, how we can, create character abilities and use the rules to kind of tell a story of what a character is. And so I certainly, as you say, did lots of mechanical design of things like some of the third edition characters, the sorcerer, barbarian rage, paladin, smite evil, things like that are things I loved cutting my teeth on too. And like I said, I was groaning about it earlier about how difficult and challenging I find adventure writing to be. But there's no doubt that it can be really rewarding too when you've done all the hard work and you have something at the end that actually you see people are you know loving and enjoying and running for their campaigns over and over again. I I know people who have said that they've run Lost Mines of Phandelver half a dozen times now for a different introductory group every time. Same thing for Forge of Fury, or gosh, even way back in the day, like Clerics Challenge 2, which it's kind of silly. It's a little throwaway. I shouldn't say throwaway, but it's a 32 page adventure. And for whatever reason, people loved it and they played it a lot.
So, let me ask you a weird question, I suppose. Were you familiar with at all, and feel free to say no, with the fact that Peter Adkison was working on a D&D MMO in either 2000 or 2001? I can't recall which off the top of my head.
I certainly was familiar with some of the very high level, uh, you know, kicking around of it, right? That um, I knew some of the guys because it was Peter and a lot of his like kind of his close cadre of you know his like core wizards guys, right? So I want to say like Peter's buddy Scaphalias, who was always kind of this like strange gray eminence at Wizards of the Coast, and what no one was really sure what Scaff did, but he was you know he was a guy that Peter would kind of look at and say Scaff, what do you think? And uh, so I know like Scaff was leading up something, and Peter was at least engaged in kicking around stuff. I remember there was a lot of talk about. I mean, okay, it's 25 years ago. I don't think we're gonna worry too much about ideas being on the you know. I remember there's some discussion about like could they actually make a game where if you explored a dungeon and you found a treasure chest, you actually got paid, and you made money, right? Uh, and it turns out I never was part of those conversations. I don't know how far they got with them, but I think there was actually legality stuff that was kind of hitting them up, tripping them up. Like, it turns out there's like all kinds of laws in the books in 50 states of this nation about gambling and online gambling, and and if somebody you know uh, finds a treasure chest that you just made up and put in your game, all of a sudden there's all kinds of stuff you have to be careful with about how was that treasure chest put there, how did they find it, did anybody know where it was, all kinds of fun stuff, the all the sorts of old quiz show because rails they would have had on like TV shows and things for giving away money. This all applies with this, and even more so because nobody who was probably in those regulatory bodies would have had any idea what this was that they were talking about or how it would work. So yeah.
So are you, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just winding down. That's fine. I
Are
didn't
you
really know that much about it, other than that sounds like a crazy idea. I wonder if they can get away with it.
are you familiar with what happened to that project?
Um, if I had to take a wild guess, I would say that when Hasbro bought us, they probably stepped on it and said, "Let's not do anything nonsensical." But
Close. So,
okay.
while Peter was working on it, uh, Hasbro sold Hasbro Digital
Oh,
to
sure, right. Yeah.
yeah
Okay. Yeah.
to a company I'm going to call Atari because it will become Atari, but it wasn't at that point, and I just always feel like it's confusing to be like it's one company now, but it'll be Atari later, so just call it Atari. And
I know all our D&D rights went with it too.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what killed it was, well, the D&D rights are gone, so now you can't work on that, and it's one of the reasons apparently Peter left Hasbro because he was so angry that in again 2000 or 2001 this MMO got squashed, and I'm going to interview Peter about it because it sounds very dramatic, so I want to get more information. And again, if you don't know, Peter Adkison, founder of Wizards of the Coast, co-owner of Gen Con, one of the designers of third edition. But I wanted to ask you about fourth edition, and just keeping in mind that Hasbro was working on a D&D MMO 3 or 4 years before World of Warcraft came out. I think that's such an interesting frame for some of the decisions around fourth edition because, again, the fourth edition design guys tell me that they got an awful lot of, oh, look, World of Warcraft is really successful. We should do something like that. Making them from, being part of the vanguard to Johnny come latelys. And I know you worked on fourth, but did, were you mostly? Well, let me ask you this: what were you doing for fourth edition? Was it mostly Forgotten Realm stuff, or was it any design?
Um, Gosh, what did I do for fourth? Early on, we started a set of discussions for fourth edition. We had two teams that were organized. One was the Flywheel team. That was our code name for it. And the Flywheel team was all about essentially the mechanics, right? The nuts and bolts of how the game would play. At the same time, very shortly after Flywheel got going, we had the thought that while we were going to do a complete review, overhaul, examination of the mechanics of the game, we should also make a deliberate effort to see what we could do about story elements. Right, that a whole lot of things in D&D by the time fourth edition was starting design were things that had been in the game since 1975. Right? Why do ghouls paralyze you? I don't know. They just always paralyze you. They paralyzed you back in the Blackmore book or Greyhawk book. The little flimsy, you know, pamphlets. They were printed back in 74 or 75. Well, okay, they've been doing that for 30 years, and nobody's actually stopped to ask, should they do that? Should ghouls paralyze you? And if so, why and how? What's going on? Right. So that's the sort of what I'm talking about, like a story element. It's like, let's examine the story of D&D and, what monsters do, what magic is, how should, uh, planes work, all that stuff is things that we put on the table and said, if we were to give ourselves real permission to kind of consider this stuff take a step back and finally, for the first time ever, really give ourselves permission to examine it, let's start examining it. So we put together a team scramjet, and we spent months kind of talking about. I was the lead for Team Scramjet, where I basically organized the meetings, facilitated them, and kind of collected the notes, and uh, I wouldn't say necessarily led the discussion, but did enough of kind of helping to present that sort of scramjet report. Um, Now it turns out scramjet in retrospect was probably a bad idea because nobody wanted those changes in D&D. Nobody was expecting them. People were perfectly happy to say ghouls just paralyze you. There's demons and there's devils. All any kind of thing like that, or yeah, I don't know. Stupid like monster associations, like why does this monster roll with that monster but not the other monster? All that stuff, right? Nobody really wanted to kind of re-examine that. So it turns out that in a lot of ways, Scramjet was probably a misguided effort, even though it seemed like we were doing good, thoughtful work that was, I think in isolation, probably a good idea, but in really looking at the fact we're going to then present this to our audience who has a D&D that they kind of know and love in their heart. That stuff that just, it bugged people. It didn't land.
And was the spell plague and the 100-year jump in Forgotten Realms part of that?
Yes, it was. When I interviewed for my job at ZeniMax Online Studios, the content director, this is his favorite question to ask people in an interview was, what was your worst professional mistake that actually got made public, and what did you learn from it? Right? I mean, because all the times in the computer game biz, right, people screw something up, right? They delete something, they make a horrible bug, they're involved in a project that just flops, whatever it is. And I was able to kind of tell them and look, and I was like, it was fourth edition Forgotten Realms. We convinced ourselves that what we were doing was essentially Star Trek Next Generation. right? We're going to do a 100-year leap. We're going to put it into a new generation. It's going to make sense. We're going to keep a lot of the great stuff that went before, but give people a new starting point that they become engaged with. And it turns out that Star Trek Next Generation, had an audience that had hungered for more Star Trek for 25 years by the time Star Trek Next Generation came out and was available, right? There's a new Star Trek show on TV. That was, butts on the couch, viewing Friday nights for everybody for years and years and years. Because by, the show had been off the air for, 20 years at that point, right? People were dying to consume, a new Star Trek product. Forgotten Realms? No, we actually were chasing a pretty successful third edition Forgotten Realms that people were very happy with. There wasn't a pent up demand. There wasn't a need to reinvent that IP. And we, once again, as I say, the road to hell was paved with good intentions, right? We thought we were doing a we thought we were doing a great thing for the IP, and it just was not what the audience wanted. Turns out you can't tell people what they don't want. That is a bad idea. Not a good business model.
But creative endeavors are such slippery fish. Like
I'm going to tell you one of my favorite jokes, by the way.
Let's hear it.
All right. So a rich guy goes and he buys a Hollywood studio. And he spends a little time looking over the business, and he calls in his gang of directors, right? The guys who really kind of make the studio tick. And he says, well, boys, I've been looking at this business. And every year this studio, we make 6 movies. And 2 are big hits, 2 do okay, and 2 are bombs. And they're all like, yeah, that's about right. And he says, so here's the plan going forward. We're not going to make the bombs.
That's amazing.
Right? Because you don't know what the bomb is going to be. They all look great by the time you start them, right? You don't know when you made a bomb until you realize, oh, that was a bomb. It didn't go.
Well, in D&D is such an amazing case study for examining the overlap between creativity and corporate capitalism. Because so I was interviewing Natalie Egan last night, who was I think she was let go about 18 months ago from Wizards, when they had let go of essentially all the people who knew how to publish a book. And then suddenly they started having these product defects and having to not reprint things. But she talked about how suddenly all these people from Amazon and Microsoft show up, and you have these business meetings where you need to justify your sales numbers all the time. And she was on the business team. She's not a creative, and the way she put it was, she's being interrogated as to how come only 8 copies of this book sold this week instead of 10. And again, that's the way she put it, right? And it's like, what are you going to say to that?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to drag the creatives in here and be like, why didn't you write better words? So it is fast. In a thing that Nathan Stewart said that has been clinging to me is, he said he was hired to digitize D&D in some way, make a hit D&D video game or digital product. But he got to Wizards and he realized that before he could do that, he needed to fix the analog game and make sure 5th edition was a huge hit. And when he realized that, he said, oh, crap, I don't know anything about creatives. Like, how am I going to work with these writer folk? And again, they are such different skill sets, right? Like the creative mindset and the business mindset do not always overlap perfectly. And again, 4th edition, the same people essentially that said that decided Peter Adkison couldn't make an MMO are then suddenly chasing the MMO trend and was it Project Flywheel?
Yeah.
Telling Project Flywheel, hey, go and make something that's going to be like an MMO. So they produce a very video gamey version of D&D, which when you think about it, is a hell of a design problem. Like,
I actually think the mechanics of fourth edition are really pretty solid. The problem was it's not what people were asking for,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
As a game, I actually think fourth edition is in many ways superior to 5e as a game, and as a game design even. But it also have to ask a question of, is there an audience for it, right? Who wants to play it? Are they
yeah,
having fun?
yeah, fair. Um, and the guys that put all this effort in to make a really innovative version of D&D that maybe nobody wanted, but then they got fired for doing what they were told and succeeding at it. Like, it's crazy. Like, and again, I should talk to Hainso and Collins about this, I
Yeah,
guess. But
yeah.
like, who was it that said make it like an MMO? And was it the same person who fired you? Again, maybe it all came through Bill Slavicsek. Not that it was necessarily his idea, but like, maybe he was
No, he was
would have
getting a
done the
lot of that
firing.
from the from R&D leadership, from essentially card side R&D, right? There was a lot of uh, feeling from that side of the building that, hey, you should be, taking notes from where people are succeeding and applying them to what you do here. So I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily that it was Bill saying make it more like an MMO. I think there was a lot of important people at WotC, even above Bill, were kind of on board with the make it like an MMO vibe, so to speak.
And in your time at Wizards, what was the relationship between the Magic side and the D&D side like?
Uh, I would say that in a lot of ways it was two ivory towers that didn't necessarily overlap all that often, right? We did on occasion, get the opportunity to bring a magic designer over to kind of help us do something or involve them if a guy in Magic was really jazzed about being a D&D fan, and many of them were, right? And they wanted to come over and actually get a chance to kind of get their hands dirty working on the D&D side for a little bit. We would a lot of times accommodate schedules to, for example, a guy like Michael Dene was a longtime member of the Magic card side, also a big D&D fan. We actually brought him over, and he was part of the D&D's development team for 6 months, a year, and obviously kind of brought a somewhat different skill set because uh, Magic, rather surprisingly to people who don't know how it's made, is a very math-driven game, right? And a lot of the guys that are over there on the Magic card side are guys who are, serious mathematicians. So there would be some help from those guys where they would, sometimes come over and kind of look over our shoulders, offer suggestions, and we would, sometimes we were a little bit surly about that. Sometimes we welcomed it, as you might imagine, and we would also. I did notice that it felt like that was always ever a one-way street. That they were a lot more sensitive about us having ideas about Magic than they were about sharing their ideas about D&D with us. But and that just might have been my perception for what side of the aisle I was on. We did. Play a fair amount of, games together. If we had a lunchtime game of this or that going, a lot of times, there would be a Magic guy or two in there. I got to work with a couple of them off and on, like on the Axis and Allies miniatures games that I got a chance to do with around the time that fourth edition was coming out. I got a chance to do some miniatures games that were Axis and Allies themed. So I worked with some of the Magic guys on that, and certainly had fun with them. They're good guys. They just, it's a somewhat different approach to how you build the game.
Well, I find this to be winding down in time. So let me ask you some of my classic end questions.
Okay.
What didn't I ask you that I should have?
What did you ask me? Gosh, I don't know. I was kind of afraid you were really going to quiz me about the details of Phandelver, because you kind of warned me heads up, you're going to talk about Phandelver some. And I actually admit, I went and I spent half an hour. I pulled out a copy and I was looking at it. I was like, okay. Casey says, why does, why do the red brand bandits have a Nothic in their lair? And I wanted to be at least able to remember that there was a Nothic that was in the red brand layer at some point, right? Just in case
I
you
mean, as a fellow creative, I realize it's been a long time.
yeah, it has been. It's been 15 years, right? I mean, the trick about being a creative is you have to fall in love with the project you're working on now. And sometimes you have stuff that feels like a turkey. It's going to be a turkey, but even so, your life's going to be a lot better if you love it while you're working on it. Uh, yeah, and teaching yourself to love it when you work on it is just part of the gig. But even so, that also means that once you are finished with it, it's in the past. It's a little bit behind it. You try to move on to loving the next thing.
And this might be a dumb question, but I'll ask: did you have any inkling when you were writing Phandelver that it might be the huge hit that it was?
Uh, I would say, I mean, I knew it was a solid design. I did not expect it to sell so many darn copies. Although I kind of feel, in all honesty, I don't know if it's the fact that I don't think there's something about that adventure that is so intrinsically awesome that would justify why it sold 10 times more than any other adventure ever. I really feel like it just happened to be, uh, uh, it was the surfer that caught the wave, and the wave was a culture shift out there amongst uh, teens and 20 somethings who became kind of all collectively really interested in tabletop games all at the same time, all in the late 20 teens and early 2020s, right? That it kind of astonished me when I realized that, uh, looking at my kids, I have a 30-year-old daughter and a 27-year-old daughter. And about, 8, 9 years ago, I looked and I realized my kids, they and their friends are playing D&D, and it wasn't anything that I tried to lead them to. I always felt as a parent that it was good to maybe take a step back, and if they wind up liking it, that's fantastic. Love to play a game with them, but kind of independent of anything I was doing, or I think, and frankly, independent anything of what even Wizards of the Coast was doing. Right, a whole generation started playing these games and loving them, and it was driven by the Let's Plays on, on the podcasts and the Twitches and stuff. But something happened, a critical mass was reached, and all of a sudden, a whole generation was captured by these games and started playing them in a way that you can never actually just manufacture, even with one great product.
A thing that I might be misquoting John Peterson here, but he won't mind. I had John Peterson on to talk about the creation of the role playing game. Because of course a lot of people will just be like, well, it was Gary Gygax, and then other people are like, well, he got so much from Dave Arneson, and then other people are like, well, Dave Wesley and those Brownsteins, and then you can go back a couple other steps to guys whose names I've shamefully forgotten. One of whom was in England, one of whom was and I think at Lawrence, Kansas, working at the Army College at Fort Leavenworth, who kind of created a weird pseudo role playing game that influenced Dave Wesley. And when discussing this, because again, we're like, which man did it? Which was the person who created role playing games? Peterson is like, it wasn't a man, it was a movement, and you should think about it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah,
And I think the same is true of the golden age of 5e, where like, you're certainly right that there was a wave that adventure caught, but there was a lot of things that went right all at the same time. 5e was very good. It had a very good introductory adventure, and then you had Stranger Things come out, and Critical Role was hitting
yeah,
it about
yeah,
the same time, and it's so it's certainly fair to think, well, it was a good adventure, but maybe the adventure itself isn't the reason it sold so well. But at the same time, without a very good adventure, how often do you have so like I bought a game called Outgunned at Gen Con a couple of weeks ago, and it's a kind of a John Wick role playing game, and I got an adventure to go
okay.
with it, you know, Project Medusa, and I'm
Nice.
really interested in the game. I think the system is great, but this adventure I'm kind of like, I don't know, like It's okay. Nothing wrong with it. Um, but
Am I John Wick and do I shoot bad guys?
well,
I don't
I'll
need
tell.
anything more than adventure, right? You've
I mean,
got me.
it's there's a point there, but um, like I was like, oh, I'm totally gonna rip off the plot of Taken. All the player characters are members of a family or something like a family, and
Yeah.
somebody gets kidnapped by another organization. You need to hunt them down and figure it out. Like it just seems like that's more fun than what this is. But anyway, um, you know, Phandelver played its role in that movement, which is quite the thing. Uh, so, are you playing anything cool right now? Are you reading anything cool right now?
I'm playing. Bill Slavicsek is running a D6 game for a Thursday night group. Um,
Star Wars?
and it's kind of Star Wars inspired. It's kind of like a steampunky take on a Star Wars like setting. So we've been having fun with that. um, Before that, Ed Stark, I've been DMing some 5e 5e game for us. So started off as a Sunless Citadel 5e game and just kind of wandered from there.
Are you all in the same place?
Uh, Me, Ed, Bill Slavicsek, Miranda Horner, another TSR slash WotC veteran. She's there too. Um, yeah, so there's a little kernel of us there. Well, Zeb Cook was actually at ZeniMax when I started, but he actually retired a few months after I got there. So
Hmm.
I um gosh, where was I going with this?
What are
You
you
asked
playing?
what I was playing. Yeah. Other thing I got to say, I was really kind of curious about. I had a chance to play a game or two of Daggerheart, and I think it's actually a pretty interesting little system. I think
Huh.
uh, there's a lot of cool stuff there. I can see some things I would be tempted to tweak. Like I'm a designer; it's what I do, right? I'm not sure I'm convinced about their initiative system, so to speak, um, but
There's
by
no
and large,
initiative system, right?
yeah, exactly, right. I think it might benefit from one, but but that said, it's I think it would be easier to run in some ways if it did something like that. But um, uh, that said, it's a lovely book and I like the character classes, the take on how characters are built. There's a lot of fun stuff there. Um, but yeah, those are the two big things. Other than that, I do like my video games. I'm a big Civilization fan, so I've been playing Civ 7. I'm a Assassin's Creed fan, so I've been loving exploring medieval Japan. And the latest Assassin's Creed game. That's the big stuff.
Damn it, Rich. Both of those things sound amazing. I got a book to write, man. Nonfiction is so much more time consuming than fiction. You
Oh,
know,
I got a novel that's sitting on my desk that I've worked on about 2 hours a month, and it's like, okay, man, if I'm going to write this, I should write it. I should stop playing other games. But yeah,
I didn't even know about the Assassin's Creed in medieval Japan. That sounds awesome.
it's
Uh,
amazing. I always kind of felt like the samurai ninja stuff was maybe kind of a little overdone in media until I had a chance to explore this game that is absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. I mean, just the graphics of this thing just stunned me, and I'm like, this is a really beautiful game, and I love every moment of it. I love just riding around looking at stuff.
my wife and I met in Japan, and we have not been back since 2005. So God, 20 years. So I need to write this book, get my advance, so we can go to Japan with our
funny
4 year old.
story. Funny story. Uh, Bill Slavicsek, his wife, and Ed Stark actually went and played tourists in Japan just a few months ago. They were sending photos back from Kyoto, and they were at. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation. I'm sorry. It's just to be, I think, like Niho Palace or Niho Castle in kind of the middle of Kyoto.
Middle of Kyoto. I don't recall off the top of my head,
Yeah,
but
it's
please continue.
Niho, however you say it.
Niho,
But
that'd be Niho.
yeah. But anyway, they show the picture, and I looked at it. I was like, I just attacked that place. I was just there in my Assassin's Creed game. I stormed all the way through there, killing bad guys and taking stuff. I mean, so I just thought that was hilarious. It just goes how to show how much those folks take their take their historical inspiration and actually use the buildings and make it look as much as they can like what it would look like. They said when Notre Dame caught fire a few years ago, one of the big things that kind of helped them restore it was the fact that the Assassin's Creed guys had been there for their Paris game and had literally laser measured.
That's amazing. So I'm a teacher.
Every bit of Notre Dame Cathedral that they didn't have. Yeah.
I'm a teacher, and when I remember I walked into the kitchen that March, and my co-teacher said to me, Notre Dame is on fire. And I said, they're doing really well in a basketball tournament. She's like, no, it's on fire. Look at my phone.
Yeah.
Oh, so okay, I'll end it there. So Rich, thank you so much for being on the show and taking the time to talk tonight. This was a great conversation. I think the audience is really going to dig it. I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, it was my pleasure. Certainly happy to be here, and happy to come back anytime you want me.
Oh, and I should close with, do you have anything people could buy that would send you royalties?
Actually, a lot of my stuff is kind of weirdly out of print at the moment, although I understand I have a trilogy of novels for the Torg universe, which I am told by the people at Ulysses North America should be perhaps coming up in the next year or so with part of their Kickstarter strategy that they'll figure out a way to get those books published, because it's Torg is a crazy universe to write for, and I actually had a blast writing those novels, and I'm really anxious for people to get a chance to. And it won't, I think, be just Torg players who enjoy those novels. It'll be anybody who kind of likes any kind of geek culture, because Torg kind of embraces it all. I think those novels will be great when they come out. It's I call it the Axis Mundi trilogy, and hopefully at some point we'll see them out there, but it still might be a ways off.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye open for that. Rich, thank you so much again for being on, and you have a great night, okay?
Yeah. You too, Ben. You too.